Hi, it's me, Robert Burris here again, continuing a study, um, if I may be permitted to call it that, uh, a rather meager study of some literature that's been published by various sources pertaining to philosophy and theology. Those are my two main areas of interest. History certainly goes right along with that, but um, theology and philosophy tend, or how should I say this? They are intended to put a spin or a interpretation on history. Um, Not that history isn't worth contending over in terms of thwarting those who would pervert it for their own ends. But philosophy and theology are, may I say, breeding grounds of stupidity. Um, uh, Conduits for directing people in how they should go, in a manner of speaking. Um, and studying theology, philosophy, and history together really underscores that, really brings that out. Anyhow, I had began uh, addressing Tony Jones' book. Oh, this is, by the way, is another fine book I want to get to at some point. This is a prime example of a postmodern ethos, a Marxist paradigm. Uh, Note the title there. After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. Oh, this is rich. But anyway, we'll get to that. I'm going to reach back here, grab old Tony Jones' book on the emergent church. Tony was a spokesman for the emergent, official spokesman for several years. I mentioned at one point that while this book was enjoying fame back several years ago, that Tony had pronounced himself an ecclesiologist, and in fact, he's written another book on ecclesiology. If it's anything like this one, he throws the Bible out the window to make his case for what how people should do church, which is a favorite phrase of the emergent. And that study made me think that it would be worthwhile to see what the previous generation of evangelicals had been up to, and what better representative of evangelicalism than the much respected Billy Graham and his organization. And I'd known about this for a long time, purchased these books, published under the auspices of the Billy Graham organization, dealing with um, that one. This is the first of two. This is the other. This is the one I want to deal with today. And that was all provoked by, essentially, by this, which is a Marxist globalist proposal for world government that was brought forth in the 1970s, also uh, um, banking on, capitalizing on, if you will. The Marxists are capitalists. You know, Marx played the stock market in London, and he thought it was genius because he said something to the effect that he was using the capitalist tools to steal the capitalist money. You know, Marx was a lifelong sponger His buddy Engels financed his living for years. Well, anyway, this provoked these other books because Pastor Donald Hoke, member of the Billy Graham organization, was just blown away by what he had heard about in some meetings with secularists, globalists, who were probably masquerading as evangelicals themselves. And boy, that was an excuse for a new theology, even. The argument for which is made in one of these books. And as is my custom, I am very much interested in getting past lots of rhetoric, pages and pages of rhetoric and phony data, and getting at the heart of the matter. That's my main interest. I invite you to get these books. You know, I think you can see the author's name here. You can look these things up. We have the internet. You know, it's very easy. This is the 21st century, after all. It's like the Jetsons, you know. Anyhow, I'm kind of in a good mood today. I want to kind of get through this. So the last time I kind of put an end to dealing with this book directly. I've had some thoughts about it, and I want to just very briefly revisit a couple of things. First of which is this diagram, which is supposed to be the model representation of the complex model, which was used, you know, as the basis for this whole argument towards globalism, limiting growth, limiting population, cutting back, you know, austerity measures, if you will, all for, you know, Mother Earth, you know, that kind of thing, and supposedly the benefit of mankind. So here's the thing. This was published in the early 1970s, all right? And it had this very complex model, and there's lots of charts and graphs in here. You know, it just so happens that I was a young man at that time. Very young man, teenager actually, in many respects. I was kind of growing to adulthood. I was in my early 20s as the 80s came in, and Ronald Reagan acquired the presidency, and here's what I know about that period and the computing technology of that day. It was very crude. It was certainly not at the level of vacuum tubes as it was in the late 40s and 50s. But I worked in and around the state office building in Kansas, in Topeka. And the high-powered technology at the time they had was, well, I don't know the specific computing processors that they had, but they were using punch cards, which was the method to get data and programs into their system. And I would invite you to look up old computer technology. Basically, it was a record-keeping system, and you know, did some statistical calculating, bookkeeping, some undoubtedly some processing of tax, you know, records. That was it. So you know, it was on the 11th floor, if I remember correctly, where the one of the main centers of computing was. Second floor, I believe, also had some facilities, computing facilities, but it was practically a day that didn't go by that I saw people pushing these carts, holding thousands of cards, and they all had to be in a specific order too. And it was a real problem if the cart got dumped and the cards got out of order. It was a real big problem. So this idea, I mean, you had to be disconnected from reality, particularly in the realm of computing, to fall for the notion that they were able to model this in any real sense of the word. I mean, it's just impractical. So, in my mind, it's a slam dunk that this whole thing is a scam. Again, and it's very Marxist in the sense that Marxists were masters of claiming that Marxism was scientific. They were just opportunists. And, of course, they knew how to reel people in and hook them. And then, of course, if you study the history of it, when some of the apologists for Marxism, like Bertrand Russell and others, went and to the Soviet Union and saw the underbelly of Marxism, they basically covered it up. As a matter of fact, what was it? Boy, I have to look that up. There was an interesting story about a woman going to visit Stalin, and she saw some things that were disturbing to her. And she made a remark to Stalin, and he pretty much let her know that, it's best not to talk about that much. He made a very subtle threat. And, of course, the conversation changed rather quickly. I need to look that up. That was juicy. All right. So, I got that out of the way. We need to put these things in context. Need to get some reality in here. And then also, you may recall there was in one of the chapters, I believe it was chapter 2, they were using a little verse out of Luke 14:28, and the chapter, the limits to exponential growth. So they use that as a little springboard to get the reader, to contemplate what Jesus would have us do. Sort of. I don't think these European intellectuals were too concerned with that. For them, it was very cynical, I'm sure. But, boy, there sure are evangelicals today that fall for this crap, and they like it. It really goes down nice. It's like putting, a bitter pill into a cupcake form, really, if you wrap it in a little scripture. Okay. So I'd just like to look real quickly at context. Context is all important. Anyway, I'm looking here. I've got a King James Bible. And I'll start with verse 25. Now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And then he begins with some parables, and one of the parables is as follows. For which of you, and a parable is, a lot of stupefied Christians think it's a story, it's an allegory. Well, no, actually the word means something. Parable means parabole. It means to throw a ball down beside something. You can think about it in terms of a measuring stick. It's a ruler. It's by contrast you can measure something, get the size of it, the weight of it, that sort of thing. And in terms of thinking, it is a parallel. Okay? So parable just doesn't mean some kind of made-up story. Why would God make up stories, to teach? And, you can be a stooge and reject, the fact that Jesus was God. The Bible teaches otherwise in many places, and, that's been done. I'll just point you to, I believe it's John chapter 20. Anyway, I had I'll just cap that off by saying that I had an interesting debate, so to speak, on the internet with a woman who was a former Protestant into Messianism, kind of the Judaizing aspects of certain Christian churches. And her thing was, she proposed, well, Jesus wasn't God, and her argument was that in every place that she, looked at the writings of Paul in the New Testament, he never, now, and this is, I'll just try to cut right to it. He never put Jesus and God together. And the argument was very, very clever, actually, because he used the word and. It was always the Son and the Father, that sort of thing. And in her mind, and always separates things, because you use it to bring two things together. and so in every context, that worked for her. And so she was challenging folks to find fault with that. And I was able to find fault with it very quickly by going to John chapter 20, where the incident after the resurrection, where they're in the upper room and Judas says he won't believe until he's able to touch his wounds. And Jesus comes in, and Judas changes his mind pretty quickly. And Judas's expression of worship was, "My Lord and my God." And there was no putting a division between Christ and God at that point, and particularly for this woman. So the discussion came to an end very quickly. Anyway, may not work for you. I don't think it's to be ignored. Anyway, so here we are. I'll just start over again. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. I believe this is a modern King James, by the way. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And here's the parable. For which of you intending, and this is the very verse that they quoted, for which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest after he laid, and this is the next verse, lest after he laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. So the point is not Jesus making an argument for global government, and limiting population, which really means killing people or withholding resources from them so that they just kind of die off naturally. Basically they were abusing scripture there. All right. Okay. Sorry. 19 minutes. Wow. Well, I really enjoy my work. Time just flies. All right. So let me try to get to this real quick. All right. So I want to focus a little bit on this book, today. This is the second volume. This was the first, dealing with meetings where evangelicals and the Billy Graham organization brought in secularists, basically, to, and it was a strategy kind of thing, to bring in the philosophy, basically, that is the foundation of this book here and this movement, this globalist movement. So Donald Hook his mind was blown by all the charts and diagrams and, the doom and gloom and all that. And so he brought this in, and that developed into kind of a big deal. All right. So anyway, and the subtitle here is, as you can see, 1984 and beyond. Okay. And so that really speaks volumes, because Hoke made this in, he wrote the introduction here, Donald E. Hoke, and he basically uses 1984, the dystopian novel by George Orwell, dealing with totalitarian government, the abuse of language as a means to control people, even the destruction of language, if you will, and various perverted means of building a Marxist society, a nation of warmongering and desolation in terms of human needs, basically. All right. So let's see. I'll try to read this real quick. He starts off, may I add my word of cordial welcome to that of President Armerding for those of you who are here for the first time. This second consultation on future evangelical concerns will follow the goals and patterns of the first consultation. He didn't put that in there, but I feel a need to. Held last December. The response to that was so enthusiastic that the participants felt this second conference would be profitable, both for them and for an additional number of invited guests. I need to slow down a little bit. May I then restate the goals and guidelines for this year's consultation? To raise our consciousness concerning the problems of future change, and to enable us to become more abreast of breathtaking advances in the areas of knowledge, outside of, but impinging upon, our own specialties. To focus our attention, this is the second goal, to focus our attention more specifically this year on the future of Christ's church. Can you tell? Can you tell how hostile I am to that? Okay. How will it be affected, and how should it respond? It. Never mind that Christ established his church and he said he's going to keep it. Change is the one absolute of modern society. Huh? Really? You mean like in the secular sense, right? I'm sorry for interjecting so much. I'll get back to him. Change is the one absolute of modern society. Exponential growth in knowledge, science, and technology are the change makers. Creative adaptability and response must be the evangelical agenda for 1984 and beyond. What about the Great Commission, Donald? What about that? To inject third goal, to inject a note of urgency. Yeah, yeah. You're going to set goals, you might as well get down to it, right? As reflected by our theme, I conclude to be my, which he's saying essentially with these words, I conclude to be my particular role tonight. He is saying with those words, it's impingent upon him to inject the urgency. And he said that very word, to inject a note of urgency. Come on. Anyway, so, okay. Boy, I'm still not getting to the part I really wanted to deal with. Well, let me continue with this real quick to just, show how he does this. Perhaps I can best establish this mood of urgency by updating some pages. Well, he's channeling Orwell now. Updating some pages from Orwell's best-selling book of 1949 that gave us the peg on which to hang this year's theme. Quote unquote, an evangelical agenda 1984 and beyond. Man, this is a guy who, like Tony Jones, fancies himself an ecclesiologist, setting the agenda for the church. And apparently, the Billy Graham organization was down with it all. I mean, this was their gig, And this guy, oh, gosh. Words fail me at the moment. The audacity, let's just put it that way. I'm quoting extensively from an article. Well, so he's not going to really, he's going to use somebody else's Orwellian analysis of things to, as a springboard for injecting the urgency, mobilizing stooges in the pews, via their leaders, supposedly, who are sitting there in pews or chairs or whatever, listening to this bunk. And again, I have 40 years between me and them to seeing how things have panned out. See the current breakdown in America due to crap like this. We're bankrupt. That's just the way it is. And this is intellectually bankrupt right here. So here's where it comes in. You may not recognize it, but futurism. He's about here to tell how this guy, whose article he's going on, is a futurist. A necromancer, basically, or you may say a false prophet. Oh, goodness. This is just so theologically rich. I'm quoting extensively from an article in December 1978 issue of the Futurist magazine by Dr. David Goodman, manager of a consulting group, some change agents, of scientists, many psychobiologists. One thing I don't agree with objectivism is materialist philosophy. Birthed out of atheism. But I I got to hand it to them, at least the ones that I paid some attention to, generally reject, the um, false sciences of the social sciences. Basically, they see a lot of quackery in them, and I got to hand it to them. They're spot on. So here's this quack theosophist that Hoke is wanting psychobiologists. Huh? Is that where you get critters and amoeba and whatnot, and you talk to them, get them on the couch, or do you administer shock therapy, or perhaps you drug them, and so you can control their behavior? What is psychobiology really? Like himself, a group of scientists, many psychobiologists like himself, that deals with the future and the human brain. Oh, that's psychobiology, huh? Well, I think they already knew enough about the human brain if they were able to, pull this off. So I got to hand it to him. This guy sort of knew what he was doing, huh? Although, why didn't the church people know what they were doing? And he begins to quote this fellow. George Orwell wrote 1984 to warn the Western world about what he thought the future might hold. Though Orwell succeeded in creating a gripping vision of a thought-controlled totalitarian world, his novel has failed to halt the forces that he saw leading the way towards totalitarianism. I have to ask, where was the Great Commission in the minds of the listeners here as this was being read? Again, Donald Hook is speaking from a podium here. This is a transcript of what he delivered. Did nobody think about the Great Commission and the Savior that gave that commission to the church, to believers? What was the promise? Oh, man, this really burns me up. Now, with only a few years to go until 1984, oh, well, yeah, it's coming up on you. And being mystics, maybe fiction is going to become reality. So we have to address that. Now, with only a few years to go until 1984, the Western world is potentially much closer to his vision than most people realize. Again, where is the Great Commission in all this? And I'm speaking to believers. If I could reach back and speak to these charlatans in the Billy Graham organization who use this for their agenda, and I think there must have been some effect from that. I think the fruit of it is when Billy Graham goes on Robert Schuller's program a few years back and preaches universalism on a big telescreen remotely, saying there's a wideness in God's mercy. So the gospel goes out the window. Yeah, I don't need to go any further with this. This is hook, line, and sinker. And this is the speech, except for whatever is spoken by Armerding, who, again, the top people in Billy Graham's organization, President Armerding. These guys at the very top were involved. So whatever Armerding said, I don't have here, but that's fine. All right, so here's another futurist, addressed by Willis W. Harmon. And, again, this is a bunch of rhetoric. I guess basically I want to cut to some of his concluding remarks, which I find very fascinating, and I think really tell the story of where this man is coming from. And again, should have been alarming to the church. And another thing I want to deal with here, boy, I'm a little over 30. This is probably going to go an hour. I'm sorry. The other thing I want to deal with is some of the response. There were speeches given by these consultants they brought in. In general, they were New Agers. Prime examples, Willis Harmon. This guy that, this David Goodman, that Hope quotes, David Goodman, Dr. David Goodman. He's a New Ager, no doubt. I mean, that's what, theosophy is. It's universalism. All religions are the same. Power of the mind, Nietzscheism, will to power. This is how the world will be transformed and saved. So that's their vision. Anyway, and what's interesting is if you study the history of theosophy, the theosophists are down with just about any movement that aids their cause, and their cause being a Luciferian one world order where the power of a collective mind is applied to cause paradigm shifts that perfect the world, basically. I mean, that's the basic paradigm they're operating under. And there's been much writing about it. You can, the interesting thing about it is all this occult stuff is available, and much of it for free. So you have no excuse not to be informed. My throat's a little rough today. And for some reason, I start to get a little congested. I guess what happens is my blood pressure starts to go up. And I don't know what it is. Mucus glands kick in, and but I do sort of enjoy this. It's kind of fun. It's like wrestling. Hey, I'm a boy at heart. All right, so and basically everything is, for Theosophists, everything is directing towards Lucifer. I mean, they had magazines. They named her publications, after it. Alice Bailey named her publishing house Lucifer Press, and then changed it, softened it a little bit. Because after all, if you want access to real believers, you need to get into churches. Churches shouldn't be letting you in, not if they're, born again by the Spirit of God, as Jesus states they're supposed to be in John chapter 3. It's interesting how many stooges look past all of that and just go for the love verse. Jesus loves everybody. And he did indeed die for the sins of the world, but you have to receive that. You need to read a few verses down from that John 3:16 and see where judgment is decreed for those who reject Christ and fail to receive the salvation that he offers. Oh, sorry for all the Bible thumping. You should expect it from me, though. All right, so what I wanted to say is that, they even embrace actual science, but ideologically polluted science, to further their aims. I mean, these guys, they can blend into any crowd. I don't mean to make them sound like Al-Qaeda, but, actually their philosophy is kind of like that. I ought to track down who said this, but Constance Cumby, who's I count as a sister in Christ, was on top of this stuff back in about the time that this was happening. She was very well aware of what happened. Even had had encounters with New Agers who basically talked about this incursion, and she mentions fairly frequently the quote given by some New Ager, and I forget if it was Marilyn Ferguson or who basically captured the strategy for the New Age, their takeover, if you will, in one statement, and that was wrecking balls from without and termites from within. So here you go. The termite Willis Harmon is about to give us something, to build an agenda upon. The possibility, this is a heading, very end of his talk, the possibility of a new science. And this is where he co-ops some scientific ideas to spin a dialectic. I'll point you very quickly to Alice Bailey, her book, The Consciousness of the Atom, trying to piggyback on, and I'm not sure when that was written. It was in the early 20th century. All right. The possibility of a new science is, I wonder if it's anything like psychobiology. Well, I can tell you it is. As physicists have learned to reconcile once contradictory wave and particle pictures of elemental physical stuff, so we today are learning to reconcile inner and outer perceptions of reality. You mean like daydreams and whatnot? And it's Nietzscheism, really. I mean, these guys are down with Nietzsche, and Marx and others who think that reality is a figment of the imagination, so to speak. But you can shape reality through the mind, and somehow that translates to the physical world. And in manner of speaking, it does. We build houses to protect ourselves from the elements and whatnot. I mean, yes, we can't say that man is not able to influence his environment and change things for his benefit. But it doesn't translate into ESP, levitation and whatnot. But that's kind of what Harmon's talking about. Today, learning to reconcile inner and outer perceptions of reality and physical and spiritual aspects of human experience. Experience is one of the favorite words of postmodernism, existentialism. Anyway. Whew, if I can only get through this. This is no mere theoretical argument by the academics. All about us are signs of involvement of ordinary people pursuing spiritual disciplines, emergent, adopting holistic approaches to their health care, emergent, becoming interested in questions about death and dying. Man, it's not particularly emergent, but, close enough. Investigating the paranormal. Non-emergent, but if you're in the emergent long enough, you'll get to it, no doubt. Spiritism. Emergence is theosophy. The culture is no longer so sure that fundamental concepts of religion and spirituality are outmoded by the impressive explanatory powers of positivistic science. Why does he need that language? Positivistic science. Ideologically driven science, is that? Yeah, I think that's because again, I have had stooges that are supposed to be intellectuals, supposed to be atheists, who are just uh, icons of reason, try to tell me that something is proved by computer models, that is the same as a laboratory experiment proving some physical phenomenon exists, and it's concrete BS. Computer model is no better than a freaking video game. You're playing, what is it? Um, what's one of the popular games? Military games. You're not at war. You're not in the midst of battle. You can play that till the cows come home. It doesn't make you a Marine. Positivistic science. No longer so sure, speaking again of the culture, whatever that means, no longer so sure that psychic phenomena, uh, in parentheses, seemingly contradictory to materialistic science, are explained away as deception, error, fraud. No longer so, he's using semicolons here, making a list. I wonder if he checked it twice. Merry Christmas, by the way. This is December, what is it, 18th? Yeah. 2011. Seemingly contradictory to materialistic science, are explained away as deception, error, and fraud, semicolon. No longer so sure that the search for a universal, capitalized, moral order is fruitless. Theosophists are very moralistic. They're moralizers. And you can pick whatever standard you take your morals from. They'll be happy to help you shape your thinking, to be more in line with theirs. And if the writings of Alice Bailey and others are, remember, Harmon is speaking in agreement with this manifesto for globalism, population control, distribution of resources. So for him, he's wanting to help this along, and he's happy to be in a church and among evangelicals and have their ear so that he can drill them with his philosophy. Universal, basically, so what he's saying is that science indeed has not destroyed spirituality, and that he's going to be very happy to help you find reconciliation between those two things. And these folks who apparently are ignorant of a great deal, and I don't mean to try to steal their advanced degrees away from them. I'm not absolutely sure. I should check it out, but I believe Hoke is PhD. I'm sure there's plenty of PhDs in the room here. Plenty of people with masters in divinity and whatnot. I would say they're stupid people, but they sure are stupid in the sense that they've abandoned the logos of John chapter 1 and his great commission to the church, to wallow in this crap. Oh, man. Really gets my dander up. Oh, 50 minutes, I meant. Well, anyway, I'll cut right to it. So that's his introduction to make a case for what he calls noetic science, which is basically a proposition for realizing Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch. But in this case, it's a collective concept. And, may I dare say, it's a notion of making individuals into gods, and then as gods, consenting to a certain goal where they all put their mind power to something, and a shift occurs. Paradigm shift. Paradigm shift not only extends beyond thinking, beyond consensus. It translates supposedly into the physical world and causes molecules to realign themselves, things to take on. It's very supernatural. That's theosophy for you. It's Luciferianism. The God of Genesis 1 is dethroned. You, my friend, are the creator, or at least kind of a co-creator. And that reminds me, Emergence love to talk about being co-creators. Oh well. Anyway, so I'll get to the last paragraph because apparently that's about as far as I'm going to get. Dealing with Willis Harman. Now we are approaching a similar development. Geez, I hate to pass over the development he was talking about, but he was talking about a blending of science, recognizing supposedly that ancients of various cultures, contributed to scientific advancement, and basically he, uses Hindus as an example and Christians as an example. So he wants to, kind of spin some universalism here. But, those are remarks that preceded what he's saying here in this last paragraph. Now we are approaching a similar development in the other half of human experience, wherein the rest of subjective experience becomes very Marxist, concentrating on subjectivity and the abstract. Objectivity basically goes out the window because verification is sinful. It's sinful to be a foundationalist, according to Tony Jones, and believe that there's anything solid you can rest upon. It's better to be a stooge and think subjectively. Wherein the rest of subjective experience becomes subject. Subjective? Becoming subject? That seems very Marxist, it's kind of a perverse way. If there is no objectivity, then how can subjective thinking become subject to anything? Anyway, think about it. Becomes subject also to the same sort of open, free, publicly validated search for empirical truth. These guys are double talkers. He's making a case here, but he wants to bring in truth when it suits him. Wants to be objective when it suits him. This new noetic science would eliminate the apparent contradiction between the experimental understanding of Hindu, Muslim, and Christian. For the first time in history, we see emerging a growing, progressively funded body of empirically established experience. Body of experience. Evidence, proof, no experience. Just the mysticism is just folded in here, very finely blended. About man's inner life. Well, Willie, you know a lot about your inner life. You don't necessarily know a whole lot about my inner life, uh, except what I express in my words and my actions. But there's even more to it. There's a whole lot that goes on up here. Uh, most of it not very good. That is my inner life. Um, about experience about man's inner life, particularly about the perennial wisdom of the great religious traditions and Gnostic groups. Uh, it's very Gnostic. For the first time, there is hope that this knowledge can become not a not a secret repeatedly lost in dogmatization and institutionalization, or degenerating into manifold varieties of cultism and occultism, but the living heritage of all mankind. I mean, this is emergence. This is a statement for the emergent church, basically, uh, and being that emergence claims to be evangelical, and evangelicals seem fine with that. Um, this is, in my mind, is certainly a watershed point in evangelicalism, which can be directly traced to the development of the emergent church. So that was the conclusion of Will H. Harmon's, was it? Yeah, Wills W. Harmon address to the Billy Graham organization, A Utopian Perspective on the Future. Well, and the response came from a fellow by the name of William H. Garrison. Basically, the response is just very weak. It's a lot of church talk, which I don't see him appealing to the Bible really at all, except allegorically. Uh, well, I see a statement right here I want to pick up on, and that is, at the threshold of change, as described by Dr. Harmon, it seems about time the church should decide what its mission is. You know, well, let me continue that. If I may venture my own opinion, your opinion, again, Mr. Ecclesiologist here, rendering an opinion, where does the Bible come into it? Well, here, I think this is instructive because he continues that. If I may venture my own opinion, it seems that down through the years, the church has been torn between attending to its own institutional welfare and to the business of promoting spiritual welfare of its people. Those are the two things that divides. Uh, and he brings them together with an and. So does that mean that the word and always divides? I'm just having a little fun. It seems to have rocked between, vacillated maybe, between the extremes of sponsoring crusades to rescue the Holy Land from the disciples of Muhammad to the extremely pietistic movements which have been anti-organizational in all respects. No, I can't disagree with them there. Certainly the Crusades weren't an expression of the gospel in the sense that it was using the might of armies to try to convert the world, and if they would not be converted, decided it was judge. Well, anyway, here you go. The business of the, this is a paragraph down. Uh, there's a paragraph intervening here I'm not going to deal with. The business of the church, if you will, is to produce the Daniels of our day. Where is the scripture for that? The Daniels. Come on. That is not the Great Commission. He doesn't say, go ye and make Daniels out of people. And for those of you who don't realize, Daniel was one of a group of young Jews, believing Jews, who were carried into Babylon. And there became witnesses for the Most High God. And suffered persecutions for it. In some of the stories of Daniel, uh, are some of the most beloved stories in the Bible of Daniel in the lion's den, being thrown into a lion's den, assuming that the lions would have him for dinner, yet he was there come morning. The other story, these are stories of God's provision, His salvation, if you will, in the midst of trouble, preserving those who are His own. The other story is the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the witness of one of the Nebuchadnezzar's men saying, "There's a fourth man in the fire, like unto the Son of God." I'll just stop with that. That's what. Those are the book, stories from the book of Daniel, and it also speaks some prophecies about the unfolding of God's plan for the world from the days of Daniel even to carries you right into the book of Revelation. But it speaks, it'll bring you right to the book of Matthew and the entering of Christ into Jerusalem on His way to the cross. So this is an abuse. I really object to this. This is an abuse right here. And this man is responding to this crap served up by Willis Harmon. And he twists Daniel, into a picture of the Great Commission. That's not. Well, anyway, so this is the kind of nonsense, that I am not hostile at all to Christianity. What I am all hostile to is the groupthink that exists in churches, to the extent that anything that comes out of a church is presupposed by church people to be a movement of God, including this. I can rest my case on this. And that brings me to an interesting proposition. Any Christians might be watching this. I meant to do a Google search. I have this neighbor who is a young Caucasian fellow. He's apparently a family man, has a woman that he's living with, and they have a child apparently. But I look out my window here, and that poor fellow, he doesn't have a way to hold up his pants. He's got his shorts, just on full display, and the pants, they're somewhere like about halfway between his waist and his knees. In being a Christian and loving that guy, even though he blasts hip hop music out here in the parking lot, they'll pull up their car and sit there listening to some noise and got the subwoofer and all that going. I want to help him out and get him suspenders, you know. So I want to start a ministry, and maybe I'll go back to uh, church, to get this going. I want to call it Suspenders for the Homies, or if that's already taken, maybe Suspenders from the Heartland. There's another ministry, Meals from the Heartland. It's kind of big in Iowa. Uh, and I'm thinking, churches could help me finance bulk purchases of suspenders, and I could, you know, go to places like Chicago, New York. I don't know, Miami. Is there a big contingent of those folks down there? But we could bring them suspenders and gospel tracts, and we could get America looking good again, So bring some respect back. Make the world like us and respect us. That's what I'm thinking. Well, I'm a little bit over an hour. Think about that. That's my new ministry. Because thinking about theology and dealing with heresies and who needs a Great Commission? Take them suspenders. They'll find the Great Commission eventually, and they'll figure it out. And they'll fulfill it. Why do I need to even mess with that? My ecclesiology is, to get you guys to finance some mission trips for me, and I want to love these people with some suspenders. And by goodness, I'm going to start with this fellow out here. What kind of world do we live in where he doesn't know about suspenders or belt's fine too. Belt and suspenders. Hey, I'm a belt and suspenders kind of guy. Oh, by the way, you didn't see it, but I'm armed, so hope that doesn't ruin your day. All right, well, think about it and let me know.